The desert stretched for miles, gold and silent, under a sun that didn't forgive. Wind brushed against the dry grass, whispering secrets only ghosts could hear. Mara Delaney rode slow, her mare's hooves sinking into the sand like they were walking through time itself. She wasn't out here for cattle or company. She was out here for memory. 10 years had passed since the day her husband, Elias Delaney, vanished in this same desert. Folks said the storm took him. Some said the outlaw Boone Carter did. Others whispered he just rode away and never looked back. But Mara never stopped looking. Every Sunday she'd ride to that lonely ridge where the red rocks met the horizon. She'd stand there and watch the wind roll across the desert, half hoping it would bring her something. A sign, a sound, maybe even forgiveness. Today, it finally did. The wind shifted. Something tumbled across the sand, rolling toward her boot like it had a mind of its own. She leaned down, squinting against the light. It was a hat, weather-beaten, sun-bleached, the kind no one wore anymore. She picked it up gently. The leather was cracked, but her breath caught when she saw the initials burned faintly into the inside brim. E.D. Her fingers trembled. Elias Delaney. Her husband. The man she thought she buried 10 years ago. That night, back at her small homestead outside Dry Creek, the hat sat on the table like an accusation. The firelight flickered across it, turning the edges gold and ghostly. Mara couldn't stop staring. Her neighbor, Sheriff Tom Whitaker, dropped by, hat in hand. He'd been looking after her since Elias disappeared. Not out of love, though he'd offered that once, but out of guilt. Tom was the one who found Elias's horse, blood on the saddle, miles from the canyon. He was the one who swore he'd seen enough to call it death. "Mara," he said quietly, setting his hat down beside hers, "you look like you seen a ghost." She nodded toward the table. "Maybe I have." Tom's eyes narrowed. "Where'd you find that?" "Out past Devil's Ridge," she said. "Was just lying there, like it wanted me to see it." Tom stepped closer, running a finger along the worn leather. "That's his, all right." His voice fell into a whisper. "But it can't be. We buried what was left of him." "Maybe we buried what we were told was him." The sheriff didn't reply. He just stared at her like she'd gone half mad. Later, when the house went quiet, Mara poured herself a small glass of whiskey, Elias's old habit. She sat by the window, listening to the desert breathe. A coyote howled in the distance. Somewhere far off, thunder rolled like a warning. She turned the hat in her hands again. There was something inside, a small piece of folded paper tucked beneath the sweatband. Her heart stilled as she pulled it out. The paper was brittle and yellowed, but the handwriting was unmistakable. "If you find this, it means I'm still alive." The glass fell from her hand and shattered. The next morning, Mara rode into town. Dry Creek was just waking up, dust floating through sunbeams, the blacksmith hammering iron, a piano echoing from the saloon. She walked straight to the sheriff's office. Tom looked up from his desk as she dropped the note in front of him. "I ain't crazy," she said firmly. "He's alive." Tom read it twice, then leaned back slowly. Could be a prank. Could be Boone Carter's men trying to stir things up again. "Elias's handwriting don't lie," she said, her voice breaking. "And you know it." Tom rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Mara, listen to me. That man's been gone a long time, 10 years in this desert. No one survives that." "Then tell me how his hat got out there," she snapped. "Tell me who wrote this." Tom looked out the window, jaw tightening. Finally, he stood and reached for his coat. "All right," he said. "Let's ride." They rode west, toward Devil's Ridge, two figures against an ocean of dust and heat. The sun hung low, painting the land in copper. By the time they reached the canyon's edge, the wind had picked up. Sand danced like fire around their boots. Mara dismounted and held the hat tight. "He used to come out here," she said quietly. "Said it was where a man could hear himself think." Tom crouched down near the rocks, his eyes scanning the ground. Then he froze. "Mara," he said softly, "come look at this." She stepped closer. There, half buried in the sand, were fresh boot prints, not more than a day old. Mara's pulse quickened. Tom drew his revolver, scanning the ridges. "Ain't no one been out here since the old mine shut down." But Mara wasn't listening. Her eyes had fixed on something glinting in the distance, a small silver object wedged between two rocks. She walked toward it slowly, her heart pounding. It was Elias's wedding ring. And beside it, carved into the stone with a knife, were 3 words that made her blood run cold. "Don't trust Tom." The wind howled through the canyon. Tom stepped up behind her, his shadow stretching long and dark across the sand. "Mara," he said softly, "what did you find?" She turned slowly, clutching the ring in her fist. Her voice was low. "Tell me the truth, Tom. What really happened the night he disappeared?" He hesitated, eyes flicking to the ridge. Anywhere but her. The silence stretched long enough to make her tremble. Then, finally, he spoke. "Mara, you weren't supposed to find that hat." The canyon held its breath. Even the wind went still. I froze, the sun casting long shadows across the dust. Tom's voice broke the silence. "You weren't supposed to find that hat." My hand tightened around Elias's old ring. "What do you mean by that, Tom?" He looked away, his face heavy with regret. "Some things are better left where time buried 'em." My throat tightened. "You knew what happened to him, didn't you?" Tom nodded slowly. "It was the night the ridge fell. I was with him. I thought I was protecting the town. There was smoke, shouting. I made a mistake, a terrible one. When the dust cleared, Elias was gone. I stared at him, my whole body trembling. You let me think he just disappeared." Tom's voice cracked. "I thought if you believed he died brave, it might hurt less than knowing the truth." My eyes burned. "You called your lie mercy." Before Tom could answer, a faint trail of smoke rose from beyond the canyon. My tone shifted. "Tom, someone's out there." His face went pale. "That's the old Delaney cabin. No one's lived there for years." Without a moment's hesitation, I mounted my horse. Then, let's see who's moved in. The sun dipped low as we rode, painting the sky in shades of orange and deep purple. The air smelled of smoke and iron, a combination that settled uneasily in my gut. When we finally reached the ridge, the cabin stood just as I remembered it, crooked and half-fallen, a skeleton against the dying light. Yet a faint, warm glow flickered from within one of its windows. Tom drew his revolver from its holster, holding it low by his side. His voice was a low growl. "Stay behind me." But I couldn't. Something was pulling me forward, a force stronger than fear. I pushed through the creaking door, the sound echoing in the sudden quiet. The inside was thick with dust and silence, years of neglect clinging to every surface. And then I saw it. One plate, set neatly on the rough-hewn table as if waiting for a guest. My eyes scanned the room, landing on the mantel above the cold fireplace. And there it hung. A hat. Newer, cleaner, but unmistakably Elias's. My voice trembled as the word escaped my lips. "He's alive." Tom's breath caught in his throat. "Impossible." A voice came from the shadows, sharp and clear. "Drop that gun, Sheriff." We both spun around. A tall man stepped into the firelight. He was lean, with scars that traced stories across his face, and older than the man I had buried in my heart all these years. I whispered his name, a sound I hadn't made aloud in a decade. "Elias." He looked between us, his eyes haunted, cautious. "So, you finally told her." Tom lowered his head, shame etched into every line of his face. "I thought you were gone." Elias gave a hollow, bitter laugh. "You left me with nothing but ghosts." My tears, held back for so long, finally shimmered in the firelight. Why? Why didn't you come home? His gaze softened for just a moment as it met mine. Because I wasn't the man I used to be, Mara. I survived things no one should. I thought seeing what I'd become, would only bring you more pain. My voice broke, thick with the weight of a decade of grief. I spoke to your grave for 10 years. The silence that followed was heavy, almost sacred, filled with everything we couldn't say. Tom stepped forward carefully, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. Elias, we can set this right. Together. But before either man could speak another word, a window shattered. A warning shot from the darkness outside, the sound ripping through the stillness. Tom grabbed my hand, pulling me down behind the overturned table. Elias' instincts kicked in instantly. He shielded me with his own body as glass rained down across the floorboards. When the echo finally faded, only the whisper of the wind remained. "They've found me," Elias said softly, his voice a grim murmur against my ear. "And now, they know where you are." I looked from one man to the other. Tom, haunted by the lie he'd carried, and Elias, haunted by the life he'd been forced to live. Both trapped by choices and years they could never get back. Outside, the desert wind rose again, a mournful howl that carried the sound of hooves across the sand. A storm was coming, one that would test truth, forgiveness, and love itself. The night was just beginning, and we were trapped in its heart. "What do you mean, they've found you? Who are they?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Elias pushed himself up slowly, his eyes scanning the darkness outside the broken window. "Men I ran with after the ridge. Not good men. I owed their leader a debt, and he doesn't take kindly to people disappearing." Tom checked his revolver, the metallic click loud in the tense quiet. "So they've been hunting you all this time?" Elias nodded grimly. "And they're not the kind to leave witnesses." His gaze fell on me, and I saw a flicker of the old Elias, the one who would have moved mountains to keep me safe. "You two have to get out of here. Now." I shook my head, my resolve hardening. "No, not again. I'm not leaving you again." Tom stood up, positioning himself near the doorway. "She's right. We're not running. This is my town. And you're a part of it, whether you think so or not." A tense alliance formed in that dusty cabin, a triangle of shared history and imminent danger. The sound of hooves grew closer, circling the cabin like vultures. They were toying with us, testing our defenses. Elias moved to the opposite window, his movements fluid and practiced, like a man who had lived with danger as his only companion. "There are 3 of them, maybe 4. They'll try to flush us out." Tom looked at me. "Mara, get to the back room. Stay low and don't make a sound." But I grabbed an old iron poker from the fireplace. "I've been grieving a ghost for 10 years, Tom. I'm done hiding." Surprise flickered across both their faces, quickly replaced by a grudging respect. A voice called out from the darkness, laced with a cruel amusement. "Elias, we know you're in there, and it looks like you've got company. The sheriff and your old flame. Come on out, and maybe we'll let them walk away." Elias's jaw clenched. "Don't listen to him. His name is Silas. His word is worth less than the dust on your boots." The silence stretched, thick with unspoken threats. Then another shot, this time splintering the wood of the doorframe just inches from Tom's head. "All right, that's it," Tom muttered, his patience gone. Elias grabbed his arm. "Wait, we can't just charge out there. We need a plan." He looked around the dilapidated cabin, his mind racing. The floorboards. Some of them are loose. There's a crawl space. It leads out to the gully behind the cabin. It's a long shot, but it's our only shot. Tom nodded in agreement. "You and Mara go. I'll hold them off, give you a head start." My heart stopped. No, absolutely not. We do this together, or not at all. Elias looked at me, a deep, unreadable emotion in his eyes. He saw the same stubborn woman he'd left behind, the one who never backed down. "Fine," he said, "together. Here's what we do." The wind howled outside, carrying the low laughter of the men who waited. It was a race against time, a desperate gamble in a forgotten cabin under the desert stars. 10 years of lies and loss had led us to this single moment, and survival was the only thing that mattered. As we moved into position, a single thought echoed in my mind. I had just gotten him back. The desert was quiet again, but it wasn't peace. It was the kind of quiet that comes right before the thunder rolls in, the kind that makes horses restless and hearts heavy. Elias stood by the cabin window, just staring into the endless dark. His face looked like it was carved from shadow and regret. The wind howled low through the cracks in the walls, carrying the scent of gunpowder and dust. "They'll be back," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Boone's men never miss twice." Sheriff Tom checked his revolver, his jaw tight. "Then we'll be ready for 'em." Mara sat by the fire, her hands trembling as she loaded a rifle. "You said Boone was dead." Elias's voice was even lower now, almost a whisper. "He was supposed to be, but the desert don't keep its dead as well as folks think." As dawn started to bleed faintly over the horizon, Elias told them everything. After he fell into the canyon, Boone Carter's gang had found him, half dead. They patched him up, made him ride with them, forced him to do things that still clawed at him in his sleep. When Boone was finally gunned down by the army, Elias managed to escape. But Boone's brother, Jeb Carter, had sworn vengeance. "He's been hunting me for years," Elias said, his gaze distant. "Guess he finally caught my scent again." Tom looked toward the pale desert light. "Then this ends today." Mara's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Not with more blood." Elias met her gaze, his own eyes soft and aching. "Sometimes, darlin', the only way to bury the past is to let it bleed out first." By mid-morning, the sand shimmered under the sun like a sea of fire. The little cabin sat still and lonely in the rising heat. Every creak in the wind made Mara's pulse jump. And then, from far off, they heard it, the faint, steady drumming of hooves. Tom stepped out onto the porch, squinting through the glare. 4 riders, he said quietly. "Maybe 5. Elias joined him, checking his rifle one last time. "Jeb always liked an audience." Mara's voice wavered. "You can still run, Elias. Head north, cross the ridge." He turned to her, a faint sad smile on his lips. "I've been running 10 years, Mara. Ain't no use starting over now." She reached out, her fingers just brushing the back of his hand. "I spent 10 years talking to your grave. I can't lose you again." He looked down at their hands, his rough and scarred, hers trembling but strong. "Then pray, sweetheart. Pray I find peace before the sun sets." The riders came in fast, dust rising behind them like smoke from a wildfire. 5 men, their faces wrapped in cloth, rifles gleaming in the harsh light. Tom took cover behind the well. Elias crouched by the window, and Mara, though shaking, held her rifle tight near the door. When the first shot rang out, it cracked the stillness like a whip. Bullets tore through the wooden boards of the cabin. Elias fired back. One outlaw dropped from his horse, rolling into the dust. Tom shouted over the gunfire. 2, circle in the back." Elias ran out the side door, firing quick, clean, and deadly. Years of running had turned him into a man who fought like he'd already died once. But there were too many of them. Tom took a hit in the shoulder and dropped behind the water trough, gasping. "Go, Elias," he yelled. "Get her out of here." Elias ignored him, dragging the wounded sheriff back inside. Blood streaked the floorboards. Through the haze of gun smoke, Mara fired again and again, until the chamber finally clicked empty. Her face was streaked with tears and soot. Outside, Jeb Carter's voice bellowed over the wind. "Delaney, you stole my brother's life. Time to pay up." Elias stepped out onto the porch, rifle in hand. Boone took mine first. The final showdown felt like time itself was holding its breath. Elias and Jeb faced each other under the blazing sun, with 10 years of vengeance hanging between them. "Should have stayed dead," Jeb spat. "Should have stayed decent," Elias replied. Both drew. 2 gunshots cracked the air at once. When the dust began to clear, Jeb fell, and Elias stumbled back, clutching his side. Mara screamed and ran to him, catching him just before he hit the ground. A dark stain spread across his shirt like a desert bloom in the spring. Tom staggered to the porch, pale but standing. "We got 'em all," he said hoarsely. Elias smiled faintly through the pain. "Told you I'd find peace before sunset." Mara held him tight. "Don't you dare talk like that." He lifted his hand, brushing a tear from her cheek. "I spent 10 years hiding from who I was, but I'm dying, knowing the truth found its way home." She sobbed, clutching his hat to her chest, the very same one the wind had brought her just days ago. "Elias, please." He looked toward the horizon, at the desert, golden and endless. The wind ruffled his hair as he whispered, "You found me, Mara. That's all that ever mattered." His eyes softened, and then stilled. The desert went quiet again, as if the world itself had bowed its head in respect. Later that evening, Mara stood alone by the ridge where she'd found the hat. The sky burned with crimson and gold, the color of memory. Tom stood a few steps behind her, his arm in a sling. "You sure you don't want me to stay a while?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "No, Tom. You've done enough. We both have." He nodded, holding his own hat in his hand. "He was a good man, Mara." She looked out over the endless sand. "He still is." Weeks later, the people of Dry Creek would speak of how Mara Delaney rode out alone at dawn, carrying a small wooden cross and a single white rose. She placed the cross by the canyon where the sun first touched the land each morning. And they say that every sunrise since then, the wind carries a whisper through the desert, a man's voice, soft and sure. "If you find this, it means I'm still alive."